tired from all of these sessions. Okay, looks like we are live on Zoom and live on YouTube, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hi everyone, welcome back. If you are joining us for the last session today, and welcome if this was the only session you were able to attend, we really appreciate your participation in our virtual summer camp sessions this week. The last session in this series is on distance child find. I'm your host, Carrie Kennengeiser. I am the program coordinator for South Carolina Partnerships for Inclusion. Your presenters today will be Jenny May, who is the 619 coordinator out of the Office of Special Education Services as part of the South Carolina Department of Education. Lisa McClimate, who is also out of the Office of Special Education Services out of South Carolina Department of Education, and Stephanie Hicklin, who is the Operations Manager through BabyNet, which is out of South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And before the panelists get started, I'm just going to do quick housekeeping to make sure we have the best virtual learning experience for everyone. This session is being recorded and housed on our YouTube channel. So we are live on YouTube. Hi to our YouTube friends. And that this session will also stay on our YouTube channel, which you can find if you go to our website. All attendee videos and microphones have been muted. If at any point you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box and we will try to answer that question as soon as possible today. If we don't have the answer readily available, we'll make sure to get back to you as soon as possible with more information. You'll see on your screen where the Q&A is located and where the chat is located. And if you can use the chat for any other comments or if you have any other resources related to this topic. The handout for this session has been provided. My co-host Sarah put it in the chat for you, and the handout is the PDF of the slides. And as a reminder, if you would like to receive childcare training credits or CEUs, you must attend this session in its entirety on the Zoom webinar platform and complete the evaluation at the end of the session. If you have any questions about this or anything else, you can feel free to email me at scpi@mailbox.sc.edu. I am going to go ahead and pass it over to our presenters.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jenny May. I'm the Part B 619 coordinator for South Carolina. And while that title might suggest that I have a glamorous job like being a spy or something, really what it means is that I do special education, early childhood years, compliance, and quality. Early childhood years being preschool, ages 3, 4, and 5. Today, we're going to do some introductions. We're going to go over the context and overview of where we are these days. There's a lot going on in the world. We'll discuss best practice when doing child find activities from Part C and Part B 619. We'll share some resources and supports, and then we'll have a chance for any questions. Slide, please. All right. Indulge me with this activity, please. If you wouldn't mind to write in the chat your name, your organization, and your role there, and a children's book that would describe how you're feeling right now. So my example is I'm Jenny May. I'm the Part B 619 coordinator at the Office of Special Education Services. And the book that I choose to illustrate how I'm feeling is What Do You Do with a Problem? So go ahead and we'll take a few minutes. Please enter that in the chat. If you're here, if you're on YouTube, please just consider for a moment a children's book that would illustrate your feelings. We can save this chat and I can send it to you so that you'll have a list of children's literature that discusses social emotional health. Ooh, we've got No David. The Feel Good book, wonderful. Pete the cat in my white shoes, we don't worry. Very hungry caterpillar, me too. I am starving and evolving. I wish you more, wonderful. My many colored days. Ooh, courage. Ooh, I haven't read that one. Wonderful. Where the wild things are. Great one. Oh, the places you will go. Fantastic. How full is your bucket? That's one that I read with my boys. I have 2 kids. Wemberly Worried. Great one. There's a nightmare in my closet. No good, very bad day. Guess how much I love you. That's a wonderful one. The Giving Tree. I always cry. Who moved my cheese? Good one. Good one. Pete the cat and his 4 groovy buttons. I like it. All right. You can keep entering these in the chat and we'll move on so that we actually get to some content. But thank you for thinking about your feelings and thinking about children's literature. Okay, we're going to discuss kind of the differences between Part C and Part B 619. Stephanie Hicklin will take over for Part C.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to kind of hit the highlights of the Part C program and some of our federal requirements. You may know that BabyNet is Part C of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We serve children birth to 3 years old. We have a new central referral system. Since moving from First Steps in 2017 to the Department of Health and Human Services, we've made quite a few changes, and a central referral system is one of those. So we have an online referral portal now and an 888 phone number that folks from anywhere in the state, professionals, community members, childcare workers, families, anyone can refer a child that they suspect may have a developmental delay or disability to the BabyNet program. Those referrals are then sent out to one of the local 16 BabyNet offices around the state to process eligibility. We have a central directory that has information about providers and resources all over the state that are relevant to children birth to 3 who have disabilities and special needs, and all populations also, but specifically birth to 3 with disabilities and special needs. And we contract with Family Connection of South Carolina to manage that central directory, so you can find that on their website. We contract with providers all over the state for services like occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, autism services, and make sure our kiddos receive the services that are on their individualized family service plan. BabyNet services they must be provided in the natural environment. So that means any settings where typically developing children often go, the children in BabyNet should receive their services in those places. Those can be places like home, anywhere in the community, parks, libraries, restaurants, anywhere where children go. That's where our kids can receive their services. The only time they should receive services in a clinic setting is for a short amount of time if one of their IFSP goals or outcomes cannot be reached in the natural environment. And so it has to be very targeted and a short set amount of time, and then they should transition back into the natural environment. The eligibility criteria for BabyNet is that the child has to have a 40% delay in one area of development or a 25% delay in 2 areas of development. Now, all children their eligibility is determined using informed clinical opinion, meaning we take all of the information that we have available and make that decision. So it's not just based on test scores. So we may have a child who has, a 30% delay in one area. They don't quite meet the criteria, but we have medical report information or therapy report information that lets us know that this child really should be eligible for the program, so we can go ahead and make those kids eligible. And just as a reminder, as I said earlier, anyone can refer to BabyNet. Your neighbor, a grandparent, a preschool teacher or child care teacher, anyone. So that's the Part C in a nutshell. Jenny?
Hello, thank you. And for Part B 619, that covers ages 3 through 5, which I know many of you already know, but it's worth pointing out that we share responsibility with Part C over 3-year-olds. So we'll discuss a little bit around transition on this webinar today. We refer directly to the school district. We do not have a central place where you call and refer. When parents or other professionals call me, I refer to the school district. So there's a little bit of a different structure there between preschool and the birth to 3 early intervention. The State Department does oversee the school districts and has to report to the federal government on 3 indicators of compliance and quality. Those are indicators 6, 7, and 12. Then the preschool early childhood environments are varied. While it's still the natural setting, it grows up a little bit as the child grows up. The preschool setting would be any setting where the child would be if they didn't have a disability. So it could be Head Start if they qualify for Head Start services. It could be First Steps. It could be a regular child care setting that is licensed by the Office of the Child Care Administrator. It could be a SERDIP classroom. It could be a self-contained preschool classroom. We look at eligibility in the light of an adverse educational effect. So it is possible to have a disability but not qualify for services because there isn't an adverse educational effect. Lisa McClement's going to come on and speak more about eligibility specifics. And in early childhood, really we're looking at skills for kindergarten readiness. So you might not be able to see an educational effect in that case. We're just kind of looking at how the child is doing and what supports they need to access the typical preschool activities. Anyone can refer, however, they do need to have specific information about the child. So it can be somebody you met in the grocery store who just makes a referral, who doesn't know the child's name, birthday, and details like that. Next slide, please. All right, Lisa, I believe you're speaking to this one.
Trying to unmute, but yes. What does COVID have? And maybe I'll introduce myself a little bit before we get started. I'm the school psychology consultant at the State Department. I started out my career years ago doing preschool and ended up doing high school before I came to the State Department, but definitely glad to be here. What does COVID have to do with anything? Right now it seems like COVID has to do with almost everything, that we do. Distance being the most, obvious. We don't know what the fall is going to actually look like, even with all the planning that's going into the options that the district is offering. All good intentions that some districts are doing a hybrid model, some are giving parents virtual options, but when it comes down to that day before school, it's definitely going to be interesting what actually happens. But time out of school, time out of routine, that could look different for each child depending on the supports or lack of supports that they receive during the school closures. It's definitely affecting kids in different ways. I know just from my own experience, I have a grandson who's going to be 3 in August, but in January before COVID, he was 2 years, 5 months, and he had very little language. And, as a school psychologist, I'm like very concerned, about his language development. And COVID hits, and he's not in daycare anymore. He's being taken care of by my daughter-in-law's 2 college-age sisters who came home because of COVID. And within 5 months, I mean, he's speaking in sentences. He knows his entire alphabet. He knows how to spell his name, because all of a sudden he had 2 people giving him all this one-on-one attention. And, he's had some opportunities that other kids may have had. I'm not in preschool. I'm home. I'm not in daycare. I've had someone to work with me, or I haven't had anybody to work with me. And so things are going to look very different, and we're going to have to take that into account. Collective trauma, definitely going to have to take that into account. Collective trauma is that trauma that affects a large group. For all of us as Americans, it's that social distancing impact of, not connecting with other people, not being able to socialize. And some groups are feeling the collective trauma of financial loss and all the stress that's related to that. Taking that into consideration, and also considering specific trauma, that certain students may have that others don't. I've lost a grandparent, I've lost a parent, I have a parent in the hospital dealing with COVID. So all the stress and worries that accompany that. And I know a lot of groups, our National Association of School Psychologists and the American School Counselors Association, they're all recommending that we give kids, some are saying, the first 4 weeks, the first 6 weeks, up to 9 weeks of time to come back to school, to readjust, to get back in that routine before we even really kind of look at, where they're at in that stage of development. And I will turn that back over to Jenny.
Can we take a moment for an interpreter switch?
Sure.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Great. Next slide, please. Wonderful. So now what we are trying to address is the importance of not missing any children who actually do have a disability, that maybe a change in their performance, a change in how they're interacting with others in the world around them might not be related to the disruption that the pandemic caused. But it's important that we have ways to evaluate and assess children, even while we're distant. I know that there will be face-to-face options as we open up schools, but we might need to close things down again. So we'll need to just double check and make sure we have systems in place to find our children who are potentially eligible for services. Next slide, please. So, Stephanie, I will pass it to you. We've got some BabyNet things here.
Okay, so for our BabyNet notifies the local school districts about children who are receiving BabyNet services when they turn 2 years old. They send more information at 2.5. This is just directory information saying this is the child's name, their parent's name, I think a phone number and their address. And this is just to let the school districts know, hey, a year from now and 6 months from now, there could possibly be a child that may need your services. Some of the information that will be sent in preparation for the transition meeting with parental consent is the Battelle Developmental Inventory. We are actually, during this COVID time and the time of social distancing, we're using the Battelle Developmental Inventory screener. They're doing that virtually over the phone or video, and using informed clinical opinion to make that decision, those eligibility decisions. Some of the information that may be sent over is, this Battelle, any therapy evaluations or assessments that have come in, just to help in this, to prepare for this time. Jenny?
Thank you. And so for 619, while we don't need to do a screening for children who are transitioning, we do need to screen children who are referred by family members or other professionals to the district for child find reasons. We can do some initial screenings using distance modalities, such as the online ASQ. We'll share a resource where you can access the online ASQ online and then be connected to a parent navigator who can help parents go forward with the eligibility determination process should the child be potentially eligible. We can do some things over the phone, and snail mail was recommended by the Federal Technical Assistance Centers. I don't know how well that's been going. If you've used any of these preschool screening modalities and it's worked really well or really terrible and you don't recommend it, please do put it in the chat so we can share it with others. Next slide, please. Here's one of those resources I was telling you about. If you could share this information with families in your network, that would be wonderful. Text to Read is a new program where folks sign up by texting P2R to 734-5-BOOK-52. By doing so, they'll be enrolled in a free texting program. This program will give low and no cost language and literacy activities for preschool age children. And then once a month, there's a child find question in there or a developmental monitoring question. The parents will respond to the text, yes or no. Depending on the answer, they will be given an ASQ screener. When they complete the screener, Family Connections will connect with them, a parent navigator to kind of move through the process while the school is alerted that there could be a potentially eligible child. So that's a big resource that comes out of the State Department in partnership with Family Connections of South Carolina, our Parent Training Information Center. There is Child Find embedded within this program. You can also find a Child Find screener for free through Help Me Grow or through Family Connections on their website. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, I've already covered this slide. Forgive me. Thank you. This is broken out in accordance with our early learning standards, and it does currently only cover 3, 4, almost 5-year-olds. So it's currently preschool. We are looking at putting it in Spanish, in a culturally responsive Spanish version. And we'll see if things go well, we'll see if we can go down into the birth through 3 years, but that would be a partnership with Part C, and we're excited to explore that, but there are no plans currently. Next slide, please. There's the phone number one more time. Next slide. Another resource for parents is the Milestone Tracker app. Lisa McClimate recommended this, and it offers some activities to do with parents that help the developmental progression, and it says what kids are usually doing at certain ages. It's a wonderful app to help parents monitor child development and can be used in these distance times because you can look at the app and look at where the child is, even though it's not a screener per se. Next slide. All right, so we've covered screening. We're screened. But what about evaluations? After we have parent consent, how do we do an evaluation? It's important that we look at at data that has been collected via distance modalities, but also face-to-face meetings by other folks. So we can use some BabyNet data for transition. We can use some BabyNet data if a child isn't transitioning, but exited BabyNet and is coming back and the timeline is correct for that child's age. What we cannot do is edit the assessment. We can't change and do an assessment that was normed in a face-to-face way via distance. And Lisa can give us all the information about that in a few slides. We are looking into an enriched COVID delay as we think through transitions from Part C to B. That's not live yet, but very well could come soon. So we'll provide more information. Next slide, please. And I'll pass it to.
Okay, so this is just a little bit about BabyNet eligibility. I think we've kind of covered some of this. We covered the typical eligibility process earlier, but for COVID, we have modified our BabyNet eligibility process. All of the intake and eligibility appointments are now being done over the phone through video if possible. And we are using the BabyNet, or excuse me, the Battelle Developmental Inventory Screener. It's very similar to the full evaluation tool and has very, very similar results. So we feel very comfortable using the screening tool along with informed clinical opinion. As I said earlier, we take all of the medical information or developmental information that we may have from therapists who are already seeing the child or child care workers to use all of that information to make an informed decision about eligibility. So that is going very well. Those kids are contacted within 1 day of referral, or the families are contacted within 1 referral BabyNet, and they go ahead and get those initial eligibility and evaluation appointments scheduled. Next slide. Are you guys still here?
Yeah, we're still here. Which slide do you see?
It changed. I'm sorry. I got a little notice from my computer that said your connection is unstable. So I thought I had lost you guys.
No worries.
So as I said, BabyNet continues to evaluate children. Through COVID-19, there was no break-in services. The appointments, I think I kind of covered most of this in the previous slide. I apologize. I tend to get ahead of myself sometimes. If the family is not reached after 2 attempts, then a packet with BabyNet information is sent to the family, and they have 7 days to contact the central referral team to schedule that eligibility appointment. And all of the information that has gone out over the last, I guess, almost 5 months now related to COVID-19 and Part C services can be found on the DHHS website. If you just go to the DHHS website, click on the COVID-19 link, and there's information there about all the communication. So there have been several bulletins and alerts that are titled IDEA Part C, and all of that information is related to BabyNet and COVID. Next slide. Some of the information, I think I kind of jumped ahead a little before we were talking about screening. And I just wanted to kind of touch on some of the tools that school districts may receive from service coordinators, from BabyNet service coordinators. As I said, the Battelle Developmental Inventory is a tool that we use. We use the screening. We're using the screening right now for social distancing, but typically we use the full evaluation. So you guys may receive that information if we have consent from the family to prepare for the transition meeting. Some of I guess there are about 4 large providers in the state now who are using the routines-based interview tool. It's a family assessment. We are slowly working to implement this, to train and then implement this tool throughout the state. Staff are still using the Hawaii Early Learning Profile and the Carolina Curriculum for Infants and Toddlers with Special Needs. So these are all assessment tools that are evaluation and/or assessment tools that BabyNet service coordinators use that you may receive to help prepare for the transition meeting. Next slide. And this is back over to Jenny.
Yeah, and I think if I get the video right, this is me. This is Lisa again. And Jenny alluded to the evaluation pieces in a few slides. But just to touch base on that, and I just had a conversation yesterday with one of the districts in the upstate, and they're looking at how are we going to do Part C to Part B evaluations? Can they be done virtually? And how can we do them virtually? And they've done a few virtually and they've had some success, but they kind of wanted to know, is it okay to do that? And can they get good information that way? And technically, when you look at our SEED document, which has the criteria for eligibility for preschool, we're often looking at developmental delay. That SEED document is our guidance. The actual law is 43.243.1. And in that actual law, the requirements for eligibility for developmental delay just say two quick and easy things. They have a developmental delay. They have a delay in one or more of the 5 areas that we look at for development. And it impacts their future ability to be successful in school. There is no standard deviation requirement in that law. There is in our SEED document that is guidance. So, keeping that in mind, there are lots of assessments, the Vineland, the developmental assessment of young children that will give you very valid information in all 5 areas in that developmental delay area that we're looking at through an interview. Vineland can be done with an interview with a parent, caregiver. The developmental assessment of young children can be done through an interview as well. The ABAS, Adaptive Behavior Assessment System, is a rating scale given to parents. The Devereaux Early Childhood Assessment, these are just is social emotional. So we'll give you some social emotional information in the form of a rating scale or an interview. And there's tons more. And the district that I was talking with was doing virtual. They were asking a parent ahead of time to get some manipulatives together, get, some items that, a car that was blue, something that was yellow, something that was green, pencil, paper, crayons, some other manipulatives together so that they can have the parent, work with the child while they were asking questions or going back and forth. And they were feeling pretty confident that they can get the data they needed virtually if they had to on some evaluations. And I think the difference when COVID came around and we all left school in March was that we weren't prepared. We had no knowledge that this was going to happen. There was no way for us to prepare. I think as we go forward this fall, I think that OSIP and the courts are going to say you had time to prepare. You had time to plan for how you could make this happen in a virtual context or in some other type of manner. But I think the easiest evaluations probably to do virtually are going to be your 3 to 5 year olds. Just in the fact that, the amount of material that we're asking them to do is just a lot less than we would for a school age child. And the next, you can go ahead to the next slide. And all this, any speech people that are on will say, I hate these assessments, but I just grabbed 2 assessments. I'm not speech, but just some rating scale type of assessments that can be done, in that manner that relate to speech. And I'll give that back to Jenny.
Hi, everyone. So I am so grateful that Stephanie and Lisa were able to be on this because we had a comprehensive view of how we can screen and evaluate young children potentially eligible for special education services without disrupting things. So I wanted to point out just very briefly and then give plenty of time for everyone to ask questions if they have some. We do have statewide efforts to support Child Fund in the preschool years. I've already discussed text to read. We'll skip that one. But there is a Child Fund task force. And next slide, please. The focus of the task force is Part B 619, so ages 3, 4, and 5, not yet kindergarten. We have 4 different committees. One is transition from C to B. This is particularly important because as Part C is really scaling up the services and supports they're providing to birth to 3 children, there is a large growth in the number of 3-year-olds that we have. I think our last year's data showed that there was about a 24% increase in the number of 3-year-olds transitioning from Part C to Part B 619. This is important, and we're looking at focused ways to support districts as we look at this larger number of 3-year-olds coming. We have a Child Find Outreach Committee. We have a referral committee, and Lisa is on that committee. What that looks at is what happens when information is given to a district. Do we have areas of different quality across the state? If so, what strengths can we capitalize on, and what problems do we need to solve? Then we have a group around special populations. So we're talking about dual language learners, migrant students, young homeless children, and children in foster care or kinship care. Next slide, please.
Can we stop for a brief interpreter switch? And we're ready.
All right, thank you. So the purpose of this is to pull professionals from across different sectors and determine the needs and successes across our state in Child Find activities for early childhood. Using this information, the group developed a strategic plan complete with action steps and timelines and responsible parties, which is my favorite thing in the world. So at the end of the year, we're going to kind of see what needs exist and fill in the gaps and scale up quality. Next slide, please. So far, we've accomplished a landscape overview of infrastructure and need in each committee area that we discussed before. Then each committee developed an initiative or action step to meet the need. The transition group is working on collecting data, collecting data to be put in a 1-page information sheet so that districts can hire or staff accordingly to prepare for this growing number of 3-year-olds. The outreach committee planned pilot information fairs for childcare providers. The pandemic put a pause in those, but a lot of work was spent planning how we would do those activities. The referral group reviewed the LEA processes when they receive referrals and is looking at mobile services for audiological evaluation. And then the special population group is drafting a desk guide to better serve young, highly mobile or dual language learning students. Next slide, please. Our context shifted, as we've discussed before, and y'all are living it now. Now we are working on guidance related to distance child find and evaluation as it connects. Our other items that we're going to work on coming up will depend on our capacity for social distancing. And I'd like to know if there's something that you'd really like to know about or really like to have some information about related to child find in early childhood, 3, 4, and 5 years of age. Please go ahead and put it in the chat box. If you go down birth to 3 or older, I will pass that information on, but the focus here is preschool. You can do that at your leisure. Next slide, please. And here's our contact information. If you have questions that you aren't comfortable to ask now, you should feel free to email us and we'll get back to you at our earliest possibility. I did get some questions before this webinar. One of them was, what are the distance early childhood hearing and vision screeners? I've checked with my colleagues at School for the Deaf and the Blind, and right now we do not have a standardized distance hearing or vision screening modality. There are some things that might need to be done face-to-face, but some options where the district doesn't need to take a leadership role in doing this would be to use physicians' well visits and use that data if you're able to, if that pediatrician does offer a hearing or a vision screening, which many do, but it's not unified. I will keep working and thinking about that, but right now there's not a standardized distance service for that. I will read some questions that have just come in. What do you do when parents and caregivers don't follow up with your suggestion for a screening? I'm a traditional preschool director. Okay, that's a great question. Sometimes how we connect with parents can impact what they do. Sometimes parents are just having a lot of trouble noticing that maybe their child would benefit from additional supports. We can't move forward without parent consent for an evaluation. So even if the child is screened, if the parent isn't excited about it, many preschool directors have universal screenings in their child care center. Even if the child's screened, we need the consent for eligibility determination. So really it's just kind of talking and connecting with the parent. If the child's 3, you could send them like the text to read supports and the Milestone Tracker app. And these activities will support the child developing even at home, even with others. But really it is a parent choice. So I think the best course of action is to keep communication open in the early childhood years and support as best you're able. I will lean on Lisa and Stephanie to give some other feedback too.
And this is Lisa. And the CDC, for those parents that may not be good with apps or grandparents that are raising young kids, the CDC does offer that same information. It's like a booklet that you can print out with all the developmental information. So you could just check the box for every age. And it'll have a little section on each age, like here's some warning signs if your child is not doing this. So they also make a friendly book kind of version that you can use too. And if a parent doesn't sign permission to do that evaluation after that screening, I mean, there's really nothing that you can do. If a parent has signed permission and you then can't get a hold of them to do the evaluation, it's really a matter of documenting all your attempts to, do that evaluation with that child. And I did notice in the chat box, somebody had asked about observations, as part of, this evaluation. And while it is a required piece, it's probably lately the number one question that I keep getting. So I even can tell you, if you're looking in IDEA, it's 300.310 is where observations are required, but it addresses observations as being observed in the child's learning environment by a group member. And the group member is, anybody that's on that that team, and it includes the parent. So in case of a child that's less than school age, then that group member can observe the child in an environment appropriate for a child of that age. But it doesn't, IDEA does not define what an observation looks like or has to be. Can it be an observational checklist? Yes. Can it be anecdotal notes that you have, you know, the BabyNet provider, just write down some anecdotal notes of what her observations have been over the time that person has worked with that child. If you're going to do some video back and forth with the parent and the child, your observations, can it be parent observations? Absolutely. There's some parent observation checklists out there. I have some districts where parents are actually videotaping 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes of their child, sending it to the school psychologist. And, you know, we've had a lot of questions. Okay, once I get that video, what do I do with it? And I say this very similar to what you would do in a classroom. You go in a classroom, you take your notes, and you don't videotape the classroom. So after you've watched the video, taken notes, I would delete the video. I wouldn't save any video observations. But parents have been offering to do that, and some districts had questions regarding that. But, you know, I think luckily in our circumstance, observation is not defined in IDEA, so that gives us a little flexibility, and I hope that helps a little bit for those that had those questions.
And I can add for Part C is very similar. It's a voluntary program, and we cannot move forward with eligibility unless we have consent from the family. So anyone can make a referral, but we do have to have consent from the family to move forward with eligibility determination.
Are there any other questions?
I don't have any other questions. Oh, we had one more come in. Are we allowed to use virtual consent?
Can you tell me what that means? Is that like somebody says yes on the telephone? If so, you do need to document it, but I'll keep Lisa. Lisa will take that one.
Well, I would say definitely email is consent. You know, if you email the parent, you know, that you do, you know, this is the evaluation we are going to do, this is how you're going to do it. You know, are they willing to give consent? You send the email, they, you know, send an email back saying, yes, that's consent. You print those documents, that's consent. Some districts are, you know, I'm going to send you an attachment with permission. You can sign it and just take a picture of the form with your signature on it and send it back to me. Or if, you know, they're able to scan it back, but if not, take a picture of it, send it back to me.
So,
you know, those are other options that might work for you.
So Lisa, let me ask just some clarifying questions.
Sure.
It does not need to be a wet signature, correct?
Correct.
It
needs to be an email. You know, email is considered written consent.
Yes, but it doesn't have to be actually physically signed. It could be an electronic signature or an email text document coming from the parent to the school district or coming to the school.
Right.
It needs to be more than a phone call, though, correct?
Yeah, I would absolutely say it needs to be more than a phone call, because you don't have a record of that phone call. You know, email, you can print those emails out. I mean, even text messages, you know, hopefully you save those text messages. But you know, if you're able to do email, if you're able to, you know, send a parent consent form, as an attachment and get it back, scanned or a picture of it. Those would probably be your two best bets. You have a record then of that parent. You lose your phone, you lose your text messages, that makes it a little difficult. So something that you can print, put in the file, attach, an email you can scan and upload into enriching files and then have that parent, informed consent. And it's informed consent, so it means that you have, informed the parents of what that evaluation entails, given them all the information they need to know about the evaluation process, and then get that consent through. I would do email or some type of, way that you get that consent form to them. They sign and take a picture, something that you then can upload into enriching files, and then you have it.
Thank you. And like y'all have been hearing a lot throughout this distance time, documentation is important. So that's just kind of the same idea with consent. Other questions?
Yeah. Where can attendees find this information written so they can pass along to district administration?
About consent specifically? Maybe?
Maybe I interpreted it.
Okay, great. You know what? That is an excellent question. I will figure out the answer to that and include it in an email that can go to y'all. I know that we have our email registration list, so I'll get that and let y'all know, unless Lisa has a different answer.
I mean, they could email Jenny or myself, any questions about that. But a lot of those answers about technical issues related to IDEA, like parent consent and all that, you can get great answers on Wright's Law. I'm sure that he has, what are ways parent consent is initiated. Wright's Law and Perry Zirkle's website, both are really addressing questions that are coming up that are specifically related to issues we're having with the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll look too, because I may have saved some information from Wright's Law on that, that we could, Jenny and I can get together and get some of that information together and send out. And every district has an attorney, whether they're on staff or whether they contract with an agency, and districts can also ask their attorneys for some of that advice.
Another question has come in. What if we obtained informed consent during a virtual referral planning team meeting and documented it in our PWN?
So that would be just verbal consent, I'm thinking. I would say you're good if that virtual team meeting was recorded. I think you'll be fine. Even if it's not, your parents, if you get to the point where you're going, okay, we're making arrangements to start doing an evaluation, and a parent that gave you virtual consent suddenly says, I don't want my child evaluated, you're not going to do the evaluation. So if they're giving you virtual consent, you make arrangements for them to make that child available, and they make the child available for that evaluation. I think you'll be fine.
And Lisa, to clarify, getting consent forms via mail and email is acceptable?
Absolutely.
Lisa, there's a follow-up. People are concerned if emailing consent for evaluation and services might be a HIPAA violation?
Well, with any email, you can encrypt, that information, but most of the consent form and enrich, I mean, if you really wanted to generate one that doesn't have a name on it and you send it to the parent and they would fill in the name, you're not sending personal information. The parent would be sending you that information back with the child's name, and that's their right, or right, if they choose not to do it that way, they could say, I'd rather not. But you can encrypt. There's a lot of free encryption, apps that you can add to your email to make that happen, where you're sending a document and then the code comes later, and that type of thing.
I see that we have about 3 minutes left. Are there any additional questions for the panelists? Also, I see that Stephanie and Jenny have put some more resource links in the chat box, so be sure to click on those if you're interested, so that you can save them in your internet browser. Trying to do my best with wait time, but I know we're getting near the end of the session. So I'm sure if you do have any other questions or you think of something later, you can email Lisa or Stephanie or Jenny to get your questions answered. Thank you to everyone who attended the session. We really appreciate all of our participants today and this week. I want to thank Lisa and Stephanie and Jenny for preparing this information and sharing it live with everyone. I also want to thank my co-host Sarah for checking the chat and Q&A and helping us with time. And I want to thank Brian and Beth Ann for providing interpreter services. You'll see a quick visual of South Carolina Partnerships for Inclusion's website in front of you. If you're here, you're probably subscribed to the newsletter, but if you're not, I would encourage you to do so you get updates and information. The newsletter comes out once a month, but we'll send out alerts if there's any other training opportunities or resources that we think would be helpful to anyone in the early childhood world in our state. If you have any other questions, you can use the contact button at the top of the site to contact us. If you forget how to access us via email, sometimes we forget, it's all right. We also have a Facebook page now, which this is an old screen grab. So if you go on the website, you'll see more information right below where it says contact us and subscribe to access the YouTube and the Facebook and things like that. Again, my email, if you need to reach me, is skippy, scpi@mailbox.sc.edu. I'm going to pull up the evaluation. We appreciate your feedback. And if you would like to get CEUs or childcare training credit, this is a requirement for that. So that evaluation is up. It should be right in front of you and you can just start answering it. And then if you had additional feedback that you can't capture in a Likert type scale, feel free to email us. We love to know what you liked, what you want to see more of, maybe where we missed the mark. But also, thanks again for hanging tight with us as we've navigated Learning Zoom webinar and YouTube. We appreciate your patience and understanding and kind of learning with us. So if there are other things you'd like us to present on in the future, now that we're more proficient with these virtual platforms, we'll be happy to host some additional trainings and training series. So please give us your feedback. And lastly, if you were unable to attend using the email that you registered with, and if you're on the phone, please email me with your full name, the session name that you are attending, and the phone number that you used to attend, so I can make sure to link everything up if you're seeking those CEUs or training credits. And to our friends on YouTube, I appreciate you joining in, and I apologize that we aren't able to offer you the training credits via YouTube. There's some requirements that we have to follow in order to offer training credits. All right, looks like we got 100%. Thank you. I'm going to end the evaluation. And it looks like it's 12:01. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your lunch. Have a happy rest of the day, a good Friday, and a great weekend. Bye, all.